Marshall, Carter, and Dark, Limited. If you've been following this series up to this point, you've learned about a number of different groups and organizations within the SCP universe. There's the SCP Foundation itself, of course, and their goal of containing and researching the anomalous in order to protect the status quo. There's the Global Occult Coalition, who share similar goals to the Foundation, but care less about containing anomalies if they threaten the safety of mankind. There's also the Church of the Broken God and the Sarkic cults, who blend the anomalous with religion as part of a vast war for the sake of the planet. But now we get to Marshall, Carter, and Dark, who utilize anomalies not for altruism or some grand goal, but simply for profit.
Money.
Much like anything perceived to be rare and valuable, there are those who would profiteer off of it, and anomalies are no different. mc&d have been involved in a large number of anomalous objects known to the Foundation, so this video will go over their basic history and some of the notable examples.
Cool.
So, a big question might be, who exactly are Marshall, Carter, and Dark, the individuals who presumably founded the organization? Once again, the lack of canon rears its head, and the three individuals are hardly public figures, so it's not an easy question to answer. The Wills and Ways series of tales presents them as Amos Marshall, Ruprecht Carter, and Percival Dark, and they have extended their lives anomalously by decades at least. It's occasionally referenced in a few tales and articles that Dark is the true founder of the organization, and is far older and more mysterious than the other two, although, again, this is not necessarily true. SCP-2463 and the accompanying documentation discuss 6 small bronze horse statuettes that have the capability of converting any water from a natural source into petroleum. These statuettes apparently originate from the 3rd century, when Roman Emperor Valerian, while captured by the Persians, contacted an individual known as D. Mercator, implied to be Dark, and asked for something that would utterly destroy his enemies. D. Mercator contacted one of his sources, who supplied the 6 statuettes, but Valerian died before he could utilize them. Mercator wrote a letter to Valerian's son, the current emperor, informing him of his father's business deal, and telling him that the statuettes will be held by Mercator's organization unless he could pay a sum of 60 million gold coins, an exorbitant amount. The documentation shows that this amount was never paid, and so the statuettes were sold and repurchased a number of times to different individuals, such as one of the founders of Baghdad, before being eventually confiscated by the SCP Foundation. Regardless of how Marshall, Carter, and Dark came together, they've certainly been doing this for some time now, and they've managed to keep their identities and operations pretty secretive. But what are their operations? As 2463 showcased, mc&d buy, find, or otherwise acquire certain strange and unusual objects, mainly those that the SCP Foundation would classify as safe, and then proceed to sell them, often at auctions to the highest bidders. They don't especially care too much about who they sell these objects to, as long as they're rich and powerful, although there are certain exceptions to who they'll sell to. The documentation for 2463 shows mc&d bidding on one of their own items to prevent the Mana Charitable Foundation from purchasing it, as they likely wanted to take it out of circulation.
Ooh.
The MCF is an organization that uses anomalies to try and benefit the world. The Serpent's Hand present a much larger threat to their operations, however, a group devoted to spreading awareness of the anomalous and taking down the veil of secrecy. Although organizations such as the Foundation and the GOC are opposed to mc&d's operations, they can't quite compete with their level of economic power, and ultimately there are better ways for them to spend their time and efforts. Although mc&d possess a vast amount of wealth and control, and could easily plunge the world into thermonuclear war, they choose to use this power to simply gain more wealth. It's said that around 100 people specifically work for MC&D at any given time, running a highly efficient operation.
Well, that's not that
But
many.
they will occasionally outsource some work to other organizations if necessary. They acquire their products through various means, primarily from purchasing items directly from anomalous creators, such as Dr. Wondertainment and The Factory. They will also trade with Prometheus Labs and obtain art exhibits from Are We Cool Yet? They then sell these items across the world, and they claim the Chaos Insurgency is one of their biggest clients, a group that uses anomalies for personal benefit, often weaponizing them.
Dude, this is kind of cool.
Let's discuss some of the interactions that MC&D have had with the SCP Foundation, to give you perhaps a better idea about the group. Although, keeping in mind, these documents are written from the Foundation's perspective.
You kind of see like the dynamics, the sort of politics that plays out between the different groups, right? Marshall, Carter, and Dark is like the ones that they're giving a lot of the utilities for the Chaos Insurgents to actually work. But then you also get in like, Are We Cool Yet? Or Dr. Wondertainment. And so these are like the producers of these interesting gadgets. And it gives you like an insight to the ecosystem of the different groups behind. You know what I mean? You kind of see how it functions now. Like there's levels to it. You have like the production, distribution, and then the usage of them.
As mentioned, most of the items that MC&D deal with are considered safe by the Foundation, but that does not mean they're harmless, and the group generally cares little for ethical concerns. SCP-604, the Cannibal's Banquet, is one of the more grotesque examples. This SCP is a set of tableware, dishes, and glasses that, when an edible substance, primarily animal matter, is placed on or in them, turns into human flesh or bodily fluids.
Oh.
The transformation will be the closest approximation between the two, so fleshy steaks will become cuts from a human thigh, and red wine will turn into human blood.
So if I take my apple juice
These
there,
transformations are limited to the size of the dish, so most pieces will transform into an infantile equivalent, such as chicken wings becoming tiny burnt infant arms. Placing items vertically on the dishes does allow for larger growths, such as placing a snake upright on a dish and it turning into a human throat and mouth. Marshall, Carter, and Dark acquired the item from a secluded monastery that was using it to practice the rites of communion, believing it to be the body and blood of Jesus Christ.
Oh no, so priests.
After MC&D acquired it, they began using it as an exhibit in a restaurant, offering it to certain members as a chance to safely test the waters of cannibalism. Another trait of SCP-604 is that if any still living material is placed on its surface, it will transform into a moving human body part, such as a starfish turning into a six-fingered baby's hand that can flex its fingers.
Oh, that's crazy!
This phenomena was highly desired by MC&D's clients, and so kittens, puppies, and small monkeys were often used, with continued efforts on their part to create a human head capable of intelligent speech. Another example of their morals, or lack thereof, is SCP-1660, Unearthly Forest. 1660 is a relatively small parallel universe, accessible only by lighting a special decorative lamp and stepping through a gate the smoke produces. The universe seems to consist of a large forest, surrounded by an extremely durable wall around and below it, and the sky above it seems to contain a layer of highly dangerous gases. The forest is filled with different flora and fauna, some familiar to our world, such as brown bears and deer, and other things unique to 1660, such as cougar-like creatures capable of echolocation, and some sort of bioluminescent armored cross between a reptile and a mammal, 2 meters in length.
Oh! 1660? I'm adding that right now. Dude, that sounded so nice. Unfortunately, there's no big creators that have done anything on 1660. So it's kind of like, it's not a pocket dimension, but it seems to be like a secluded area in a different place that you could utilize as like a base or something, right? Think about it. If you were to make like your own SCP anomalous organization, right? And you just be like, hey, Color and Dark, how much for this extra, like this place where we can be, have our base and whatnot? And you could buy this lantern thing and you can get there. That would be amazing. Although I don't know how you would like go back and forth, so to speak. I don't know the mechanisms of 1660. That's absolutely awesome, dude. I don't know why you would want to create a group though. Maybe there's like something. I think my group would just be self-development. To be honest, it would just be like to improve oneself for the sake of improving oneself. Is there an organization like that in the SCP universe? That would be kind of cool. Yeah, I think I would do that. If I were to create an SCP like a group that did something, I would probably do like improve for improving's sake, so to speak, including using anomalies. That would be fucking awesome, actually. Sorry, I'm going on such a tangent because it was a fun idea just to consider, like, if I were to create a group, what would we do? How would we align ourselves? I'll be honest, we probably would be partners with Marshall, Carter, and Dark because we would rely on them for anomalies, right? But it's cool. Sorry for the tangent. I just think it's awesome.
These creatures possess forepaws jointed like human hands, and are also sapient, having created simple tools, fire, and their own language. Their cave paintings seem to show images of them being hunted by humans, and then another set of humans that saved them, wearing the SCP Foundation symbol. It seems that mc&d was using 1660 as a hunting grounds for clients, and now the sapient creatures worship the Foundation as their saviors. mc&d aren't always morally bankrupt madmen focused solely on profit, however, as SCP-2501 shows. 2501, the Claw, is a large mechanical gauntlet seemingly created by Russians prior to the 1960s, and its functions are permanently turned on, with no way to alter or disable them. When an individual wears the gauntlet, they are capable of exerting immense pressure on any object within sight, simply by holding the gauntlet in front of them and squeezing the claw so that the object is between it.
That's pretty cool.
This pressure is capable of crushing a soup can from a meter away, flattening a tank from 200 meters away, and potentially even crushing asteroids or planets.
Wait, does this
How
strength
mc&d
increase on the
acquired this item is
distance?
unknown, and they apparently sold or lended it to a few clients before deciding it was simply too dangerous. Rather than risking a wealthy individual try to flatten the sun, they shipped it off to the SCP Foundation for safekeeping. Although there isn't much love between the two groups, they acknowledge that the Foundation are simply better at keeping dangerous things safe and contained. SCP-2776 is another interesting example of the potential power that mc&d can wield, and their capabilities of affecting history. 2776 is essentially a lifelike automaton resembling George Washington. This robot contains some prosthetic features available in the 1700s, such as glass eyes and false dentures, but also possesses some highly advanced features, such as armored plating and a small fusion reactor. Letters recovered reveal that mc&d created 2776 using the corpse of George Washington, who died while still an officer in the French and Indian War.
So they are ancient! These people are so old. You know, for them to be around, they gotta be hundreds of years old. Like the main members. Or maybe it's like a family thing, like a family business, you know what I mean? Carter and, Dark is like just the son of the son of the son, you know what I mean? Although I do think it probably that they're using some anomalies to stay alive, some Thaumiel ways of extending life, it seems. It's probably more likely. Oh, they also, I just remembered, Marshall, Carter, and Dark, they also had something to do with, what's that circus called? Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting. Yes, sir. That was a great SCP. That was a great SCP. I read the first can. It was actually really good. But yeah, I think that's one of the first times we ever heard about Marshall, Carter, and Dark too, was through them, because they were talking about buying some clowns back or something. Interesting though.
Apparently, the colonists needed both an inspirational leader as well as more firepower, and so mc&d supplied both with 2776. One of their employees, named Martha, was assigned to maintain the automaton, and he was given an estate away from prying eyes to avoid people discovering his true nature. After winning the Revolutionary War, 2776 was put into a standby mode until he was recovered in 2007 by the SCP Foundation.
Oh, they got him.
2776 was not aware of his mechanical nature, and eventually broke containment after watching a television program describing a buyout of an American company by a British company. His core began emitting massive amounts of gamma radiation,
Jesus
and he
Christ.
killed everyone in his path as he moved towards London, until he was recontained.
A bit dangerous,
It's hard to look at Marshall, Carter, and Dark and see them as anything close to good, but it is easy to see them as realistic, at least as far as an
logical.
SCP universe is concerned.
Somewhat.
Merchants taking the rare and valuable and finding a profit with them have existed for thousands of years, and it makes sense that anomalies would be no different. While the SCP Foundation and the GOC will continue to raid mc&d facilities and reclaim objects, they don't make a grand effort to wipe them out either. Perhaps this is because of instances like SCP-2501, where they know that there are worse groups for anomalies to end up with, and hope mc&d still bring the really dangerous items to them.
Yeah.
Or perhaps they realize that going to war with mc&d would be a lot like poking a bear with a stick, and cause quite a bit of trouble for both sides. Either way, mc&d have dealt with the rich and powerful for a very long time, amassing quite a fortune. And as they say, money makes the world go round.
Woo! That was pretty good. Do we get a quote? Oh, yes sir, we do. Righty. Without question, Marshall, Carter, and Dark are one of the most important pieces on the chessboard of the anomalous world, occasionally putting other players into check, but never into mate. For Marshall, Carter, and Dark, the planet is an intricate network they have secured safely beneath their thumbs. Whether winning and losing are meaningless terms, there is no need to move pieces when you can move the board. When you can end the match at any time, there's only one reason to continue. It's all about playing the game. And there we have it. Marshall, Carter, and Dark. Ooh, woof. So actually it might be, Marshall, Carter, and Dark might actually be the most powerful group in the SCP universe. Even though it's very, very small, it might be one of the most powerful ones. And it also seems like they're rather logical. I don't hate them. Yeah, I get it. They're all for money. That's a little bit like come on, dude. All about money. But I kind of get it, So that's, I get it. But it's nice to see them being like somewhat realistic, as Exploring Series said, that they aren't all about this, it isn't profit at any cost, if that makes sense. It is like, okay, this one is too dangerous. We can't have this one running around. We can't give this to a client. He will literally destroy the world. Like the fucking, like the weird robot arm, right? Which makes perfect sense, really. I mean, you could literally crush the moon with that item. It is also fun to see like the SCP Foundation and its interaction with Marshall, Carter, and Dark. Like how they interact with each other, so to speak. And it does seem though that the SCP Foundation itself is more like not good playmates with Marshall, Carter, and Dark. They're more like a what you say? Like for Marshall, Carter, and Dark, the SCP Foundation is like a garbage bag. You know what I mean? It's great at containing shit they don't want to have. That seems to be how the interaction goes between them. And with the Chaos Insurgent, it seems to be more like a business partner. Now I don't know, Serpent's Hand seems to be a little bit against it. Obviously they are for the exposure of the anomalous, and so I would imagine that Marshall, Carter, and Dark don't really deal too much with the Serpent's Hand, or the Mana one. I don't remember what that one was. freeing mana or something. I haven't really encountered that group yet. We haven't really talked about it. And I think honestly, no matter what group you would join, no matter what you would do in the SCP universe, if you were doing anything with anomalies, it looks like you would deal with Marshall, Carver, and Dark to some extent. Even if it was the SCP Foundation. All in all, brilliant. Really liked it. I do like these general videos where we get to see a groups behind all the anomalies, because it's often that we encounter different groups without really going too much into them. And so I think this is a great way to kind of understand them, because we're definitely going to meet them again. We've met them already multiple times, and now we know fully what they are and where they're from, so to speak. Or we know that we don't know where they're from, but you get the point. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a video. I certainly did. And comment some comments down below if there's anything else you want me to react to. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Alrighty? Peace!